Hello, and thank you for joining us. The Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center would like to welcome you to today's webinar event, Community Resiliency Model for Behavioral Health Workforce. My name is Stephanie, and I will be moderating today's event. Before beginning today's presentation, I'd like to say a few words about our center and address some housekeeping items. Please note that the work of our center is supported by a grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Our center and the larger MHTTC network use affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all of our activities. The Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is proud to serve the 8 states in HHS Region 4. Our expertise in public health programs, systems, research, and evaluation provide a unique lens through which we can address mental health priorities. We encourage you to visit our website, mhttcnetwork.org/southeast, to learn more about our upcoming training activities. A few important notes for today's events. This event is being recorded and will be posted to our website for on-demand viewing soon. We encourage you to share your comments throughout the presentation using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to select chat with all attendees if you would like to share your thoughts with everyone. We have saved time at the end of the presentation for our presenters to answer questions. Please submit your question using the Q&A feature also found at the bottom of your screen. Finally, for individuals who are interested in a certificate of attendance, one is available for download after completion of our evaluation surveys. So we are excited to have Lindy and special guest Bree Davis join us today. Dr. Grabby is a board-certified family and psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and clinical assistant professor at Emory University School of Nursing. Her clinical expertise is in primary care and mental health care for homeless or incarcerated women and youth, and providing the CRM training in group settings. Her interests include public mental health, trauma-informed care, the neurobiology of trauma and resilience, social justice, and social determinants of mental health. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Lindy to begin the presentation. Thanks for joining us today, Lindy.
It's wonderful to be here, and we're thrilled that we have a nice big crowd. So let me give you a little background about us and the Community Resiliency Model to start with. I did primary care with homeless populations of women and children in Atlanta for 20 years, and I was just being pulled towards mental health because I was having such a struggle to get anybody that I was seeing seen by professionals. So I became a psych NP, and I'm trained in a number of different models, but this was the most powerful one I felt. And I really got trained to teach it because I intended to use it with the homeless youth at Covenant House in Georgia. Little did I know how much I would end up using it myself, or that I would end up becoming a big researcher on this model. And along the way, I made the acquaintance of Bree Davis, who's kind of a family member. And Bree, can you tell them what you do?
Oh, we just adopted a little puppy, and she is a senior puppy dog. She's growling up a storm for some reason. Anyway, I've been doing CRM for about 5 years following Lindy. I've taken over for the Covenant House classes most of the time. And I also use my CRM background for my work as an advocate at a domestic violence shelter. So that's where a lot of my examples of stress and how it could manifest and how we deal with it, come from.
So this model came out of actually some disaster zone interventions where there wasn't time to do psychotherapy, but there were people who went to these sites Those that were trained in body-based approaches like somatic experiencing could teach emotion regulation techniques to survivors of disasters. And we're talking about Katrina and the earthquakes in Haiti and China. It turns out that the rates of PTSD were way down among those who got this training, and it could be taught in as little as 45 minutes. So the Trauma Resource Institute was founded, and they teach not just the community resiliency model, but also the trauma resiliency model, which is psychotherapy. So any of you with advanced degrees can qualify. It's a much more affordable model than some of the other ones that like somatic experience, sensory motor psychotherapy. But the idea is that trauma really registers in our bodies, and we've got to do something about that. So cognitive approaches are excellent, but this really is significantly different. And CRM, or is part of TRIM, and she's just published a new book last week, second edition. Elaine Miller-Karras developed the model. So CRM involves, it's just self-care. It's not therapy, and that makes it so much more acceptable to people. But I hope you'll come away from this experience today with some new skills for your own well-being, but then that you should feel free that you can act as a CRM guide, and that you can teach one-to-one other people around you. So we'll talk about how stress and trauma affect us. The resilience zone is the key concept. And then the skills are actually handy as a way to cope with stress, anger, and sadness. And then use the skills for your own self-care or to help others. And we have no conflicts of interest. There they are, the 6 skills, and they are described beautifully in a short app called iChill. And it's also available, the iChill app is available also in Spanish. So feel free to share this with your clients or friends, family, etc. It's in Spanish and Ukrainian, and the Trauma Resource Institute was on the ground in Ukraine before the war started there. So fortunately, there's been good resources for that very traumatized population. As you can see from this, what's smack dab in the center is tracking. Tracking is paying attention to body sensations. So this slide helps sort of position CRM, because we know that if we use cognitive approaches to well-being, and I'm talking about negative self-talk, gratitude journals, things like this that are very cognitive, these are enormously valuable and make a big difference. If we are comfortable sharing our emotions with others, talking to a therapist, we all probably need a therapist at some point in our lives, is good. And then finally, there's this other portal, which is through sensations. That's what CRM is all about, body sensations. And so we hope that you'll be open to discovering this. This is still quite cutting edge, even though I was trained 8 years ago. Things take time, but it's very exciting. And there are actually 4 HRSA projects across the country right now that involve CRM. So it's all about biology. To our knowledge, this seems to be pretty much universal and acceptable to everybody, because it has been used in 40 different countries so far. There's a school system up in North Carolina. Wake County teaches all K through 12 students this very nice, tight, compact little model. It seems to be transcultural, And the oldest person to learn CRM was over 100. The youngest was a 2-year-old, and I saw a video of his 5-year-old brother teaching him a technique to calm himself by pushing up against the dishwasher that little 2-year-old really enjoyed. So it can be taught very quickly and easily. So we find that the model kind of normalizes stress and trauma reactions, because sometimes we react in ways that are adaptive and healthy, but a lot of times we may engage in unhealthy kind of responses. So it just puts these out there, and I think people will have more self-compassion or other compassion as a result. I also think it's a destigmatizing model. And, we have many communities where mental health is a real bad word. Mental health care may, having a mental health problem, getting mental health care, there's so much stigma. So I believe that this simple model may increase acceptance of more conventional kinds of behavioral health care, be it therapy or medications, etc. As I said, it was initially used in disasters with less PTSD subsequently. Elaine Miller-Karras came back to California, and she used it with a series of marginalized groups in California, and they exhibited improved mental health as a result. And then here at Emory University, we did the first research. We have 2 randomized control trials now, which shows that people in high stress occupations, and I really include in that police and first responders. And so what we've found consistently is lower secondary traumatic stress, which is very similar to PTSD, and absolutely significantly an improved sense of well-being. So it's rather magical. So I'd like to invite you all to put in the chat right now whatever comes into your mind about something that uplifts you or brings you strength, and think about what or who helps you get through hard times. And if you would please put that in the chat, and I'll see if I can see it. Friends, music, exercise, peer support, faith. That's a big one. Family, sister. Wow, look at all this. My faith, Lord Jesus. Breathing deeply, meditation, nature. Yeah, nature. So you have named what people universally name. We all kind of depend on these things. Driving alone, pottery. Yeah, okay. And granddaughters. Yes, family is a very big one too. Animals, more horses. Wonderful. So with CRM, what we're going to ask as we go through this is, when you think about that source of strength, we're going to be asking you to notice as you think about it, what happens in your body. We're designed to kind of pay attention to discomfort, pain, etc. But we can also pay attention to positive, pleasant sensations too. And when we talk about resiliency, people usually say bouncing back from adversity. The one I like is by Christina Bethel. And she says for children, it's the ability to stay calm when they're challenged. And I like that one too. This is absolutely part of a perspective shift. And let's start with the red square. You all are now aware of trauma-informed care or policies and practices. So this encompasses the ACE, Adverse Childhood Experience research that was done about 25 years ago. So this was a big departure from sort of the conventional view, which separates mental health problems and addiction and trauma, right? And this sort of the conventional view kind of blamed the victim, I guess, and pathologized, what's wrong with you? But with CRM, what we're saying is we need to go a step beyond just being trauma informed. That's not good enough. We've got to be able to act. We have to be able to teach people, if they need it, some skills of well-being and how they can cultivate those skills to reduce their own stress and suffering. So the question becomes, what's strong about you? And the first concept is the resilience zone. And this blue lines represent the bandwidth of stress tolerance. So this has been used in some other psychotherapy literature, but Elaine was the first person to call this zone the resilience zone. Now, when you're at your best self, you're definitely in this zone, okay? But you could also be in a bad mood or upset or a little bit sad. But as long as you're within this resilience zone, you can function okay, think clearly, work with other people, etc. The red line represents what's going on in our nervous system. And CRIM is all about awareness of body, what's going on in the body, and being able to change some of our responses. The upswing represents the sympathetic discharge, which is the accelerator of the nervous system, and then the downswing is parasympathetic dominance. This is recovery. So this is where we can automatically put ourselves by using a CRIM skills. And you are already doing things. When you exercise, you're getting some of this recovery. When you do breathing exercises to calm yourself, that puts you into this parasympathetic space. And you know what? When we're doing that, we're dropping our blood pressure and our heart rate in a very nice way. So the goal of CRIM is to widen the resilience zone. So we're just more able to go with the flow and react appropriately to stress, but also to get back into the zone. Now, some people have a narrower zone than others, but we all have a narrower zone when we are tired or hungry or in pain. So this awareness kind of makes us a little bit more sensitive. And then, of course, after work, if we're relaxed at home, our zone is much wider. And unfortunately, things happen, and all is not always well. So the lightning bolt here represents trauma or something just stressful, or something that is cumulative, just kind of puts you over the edge. But it could also be a traumatic reminder or some sort of trigger, which often is sensory. So this throws things out of whack, and we can be pushed outside the zone. Now, if we get too much of the accelerator, the sympathetic nervous system dominance, then we get irritable or angry or feel panicky or anxious. And sometimes if we can't get back into the zone, we can be stuck out here, which is very scary. And when people are stuck, that's when they're at risk for suicide or violence, for example. Now, you can also get stuck down below. And when we get too much of this parasympathetic breaks, we get sad and depressed or exhausted. Can't even get out of bed and feel numb. And this is where we might see dissociation even. And so this feels really bad too. And people, all of us, engage in a lot of behaviors to try to feel better, to get back into the zone. But I think that image just there depathologizes a lot of our trauma and stress responses, which is, people need to be more self-compassionate. So I'd like you to put in the chat what comes into your head when you look at these 6 different categories. And you can answer some of the reactions that you've either seen in other people, family, patients, clients, or in yourself too. And if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, what kinds of reactions have you seen in people? Crying, panic, irritability, overeating, anger, lashing out, snappy, forgetting to breathe. Really good. Okay. Oh. Outbursts, overeating, lashing out, sleeping a lot. You can see there's huge range and sort of generalized thinking. Okay, you're on it. So thank you so much. You're absolutely on top of all of this. And I'm going to just show you what we've heard people list. So you can see, you named some of the cognitive effects of trauma. So everything from forgetfulness and dissociation to suicidality. You named some of the, tight breathing, for example, as a response. Lots of physiologic responses. Spiritual is really interesting because sometimes it's a loss of faith, but sometimes hyper-religiosity too. And this hopelessness. But the deconstruction of the self is very interesting to me because with PTSD, you kind of no longer know who you are, or you're not the same spouse or father or mother that you were before your trauma. A whole range of emotional and responses, and you named all those, the relations, snapping at people, yelling, and so on. And then this is where we get our problems in behavioral health, because we see addictions, we see violence, self-injury, eating, and you named some of these things. So, but keep in mind that when we get these responses, it's because we're in our high zone or we're in our low zone. And Bree's going to take over here.
All right, so in order for us to basically read where we are in our resilient zone, we need to learn how to track. So tracking is just understanding the signals our body is giving us, reading the sensations that come up. So this is introspection. So we're determining, we're scanning our body and trying to determine if a sensation that we've noticed is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And once we have determined if it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, we're going to stick with the pleasant or neutral ones, because what we pay attention to grows. And we'll talk about that in a second. So when we start doing this, we can learn to put our attention on the sensations that tell us that we're inside of our resilient zones, our sensations of well-being, and know the difference between those and their sensations of distress. So this is individual to everyone. For some people, maybe a shower is an unfortunate, like a not great sensation, but for others, it's the most relaxing thing in the world. So when we do this, we know what things we can pay attention to on the inside. We have a choice, and we can find some relief in that. So this is one of my favorite studies. This was done in, I want to say Norway. It's Eastern Europe, and there's, thank you. So 2 different countries on 2 different continents, Asia and Europe. We have a study with 4,000 participants in which they self-report where they felt sensation in their body when shown different stimuli that's meant to anger them or make them happy, or not cause any change whatsoever. So they label the emotion and they label where that sensation comes up in their body. When we show this to the youth at the Covenant House, we get a lot of recognition of these sensations, understanding that when you're depressed, it really does feel like you have a lack of sensation. That's that blue color that you see in the legs and the arms, in your arms and legs. In fact, when we draw cartoons and try to explain people's emotions through it, you'll often see the cartoons slumping down, dragging their arms and legs, because we understand that that is the feeling of being depressed. Same at maybe happiness, the idea that your entire body's lit up. That red and yellow being an increase in sensation. the Black being neutral. But imagining maybe, someone jumping up and down on a couch because they're so excited about something, they're just so happy and full of energy. You see that person using their entire body. For someone who is angry, they might be more inclined to feel sensation in their fist, might ball up their fist, even if they don't use them, just holding them at their sides. So these are sensations that no matter what language you speak, no matter what culture you're from, we all have a nervous system, and these sensations come up no matter what for us. This is just a part of our nervous system. So this is what we were talking about, this new doorway where we usually look at emotions, but what about sensations? So now that we've talked about sensations, let's start creating a sensory language. So the things that we typically look for, especially when starting off, are your muscle tension. What do you feel like your muscles are tight, loose? Do you feel like it's calm, rigid? Sometimes I don't notice that I am really tense until I start feeling pain in my shoulders from being so tight. At that point, it could be pretty mild usually when I notice, but see right next to the muscles, there's pain. We have temperature, so that's a good one. We often can run hot when upset, maybe feel the blood drain out of us when we get startled with some unfortunate news. So we could feel cold. These are things that we want to pay attention to. Breathing and heart rate are also really important. Breathing is one of the few things that we have control over, at least our breath rate, when it comes to our nervous system. Yes, shaking is a really common reaction. So breathing is one of the few things we have some matter of control over, so we can change that a little bit. But noticing your heart rate for some people can also really tell them where they are in their resilience zone. So these are things that we want to start paying attention to, creating a sensory language around. So as I mentioned before, what we pay attention to in our body really does grow. So like a garden, we want to start to pay attention to the flowers and the plants that we want to grow, and not so much water the weeds, because when we pay attention to things, we're telling our brain, this is important. This is something that that we need to address right here and now. So if we don't need to address it right here and now, we can take a moment to pay attention to the things that tell us that we are safe in this present moment, the things that help our nervous system calm back down, know that we're not life or death. So that being said, once we start learning these wellness skills, it really helps people understand that if their reaction to stress and trauma can't be talked away, there's a chance that we can still sense it away. People learn that their symptoms are not about some sort of mental weakness, but it's instead biology. This is the way our bodies were created to keep us alive. It's survival. And oftentimes learning that can be really relieving for people. They feel as if they haven't done something wrong. They just were following their body probably a little past what they needed to. Now we need some wellness skills to help our nervous system know that we don't need to be anxious about this situation. But for some people, experiencing even pleasant or neutral sensations can spark, especially if they have any sort of trauma associated with those sensations, or noticing their body tracking this means that they could bring up some stressful moments for them. So we learned that CRM is a choice. We never ask anyone to dive into their sensations if it is too distressing. We can always stop, and there are some skills that are not as internal, such as our help now skills.
Bria, before we go on to the next skill, could you do the hand rubbing exercise?
Oh, absolutely. So as an explanation for how we can track, I would like us all to put our hands together and start to rub them. Just rub them as fast as you can until I say stop. And I want us to notice what's going on in our hands. What do you feel? If you need to do it again to pay more attention. Yeah, warm, tingling, yes, heat, So what we're doing right now is tracking. This is interoception. We usually notice it when we have to go to the bathroom or we're hungry, but this is something that we can notice all the time for even just the minor things, such as if our hands are cold or warm or tingling, and even the sounds. All right, so now that we have learned about tracking, let's learn about resourcing, because resourcing is one of our more pleasant skills that can really help us understand why tracking is important. So to understand a resource, we need to remember to pay attention to our sensations in pleasant moments. So this is a pleasant moment for these people. What sensations might they notice that are pleasant or just neutral in this moment? If we could put in the chat, what are some sensations? So it's sight, sound, taste, touch. Sound, taste, touch, hearing. Yeah. Wait, no, I already put that. So I see sights of friends, coffee, taste, food. Yes, perfect. The sensation of laughter. So even feeling yourself laugh or hearing your friends around you laugh, those can both be very pleasant. Just smells, comfort of being around people. Yes. Cheeks sore from laughing. So this is perfect. Even we see a little window right there. So I saw someone say birds. There could be birds outside because it's right there, the lightness. All right, so this is basically a resource. A resource is any person, place, thing that when you think about it, when you experience it, it brings you joy, calmness. We'll go to the next slide. That makes you feel calm, pleasant, peaceful, strong, or resilient. So it's anything that is a part of your life, whether it's real or imagined, that when you think about it, it brings you to this place of wherever positive sensations are going on with it. So it could be exciting, it could be an amusement park, it could be a calming day by the river, or it could be real or imagined, so a vacation that you've actually been on versus a dream vacation, dream home. What would that be like? What would you want to do? It could be internal or external. So something about yourself that you are really proud of. Maybe it's a skill that you have or some ability of yours. Maybe you can really do math in your head. Or it could be external, your family that you have created around you, or your friends who know you well or are proud of you. These are things that are outside of yourself, but still can bring you strength. So when you are thinking of a resource, you're just going to pick one of these and you're going to try to make it as detailed as possible in your head. Or when you're trying to resource someone else, you're trying to get them to tell you a picture that is as detailed with as much sensory language as possible so that they can really bring themselves back to that moment or place inside their mind. And we'll start to notice inside of your body that it changes our nervous system. It can change how we are experiencing our bodies or what sensations come up to us in that moment. So that being said, since resources can be absolutely anything, sometimes our resources have multiple natures. So if your resource is perhaps a loved one, unfortunately, we are not invincible. Sometimes we get sick, sometimes we lose contact. There's a number of reasons why a resource, especially a person, might have a dual nature. So maybe you're talking about your favorite cookies that your aunt used to make, but she's no longer here with us. So it's a little bit sad, but you still remember when she made those cookies. What we do is we try to acknowledge the sadness if you start to notice maybe a little tear or something, but then we try to bring it back to the more resilient parts of our resource. So what would she say to you when you're sad? How would she cheer you up? Or what was something that she taught you that you really cherish? Just focusing on the things that can really help us feel strong about in our daily lives. And if you can't find that strength in that specific resource in this moment, there's a reason why we have so many, why it's such a really open definition. It's because you have millions of resources that we can exchange depending on what's going on in your life.
So, Bria, may I resource you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was at a workshop and I learned something kind of interesting. So thanks for helping. I wonder if you can tell me about something that gives you a sense of calm or joy, peace, or comfort. So it could be a memory or a certain person or an animal or maybe a place. Could be an object or some activity that you love, or something about yourself, like about your personality or your body.
It's a beautiful day today, so it's kind of been making me want to go fishing. I haven't been fishing in such a long time, and I really miss it.
So if you think about some time that you were fishing that was special, I wonder if you could just kind of describe the scene and who was there, etc.
Yeah, I remember fishing with my mom and my best friend. It was actually her first time fishing, and this was in elementary school, right towards the end of elementary school, 5th grade. And my stepfather, we rented like this little boat and went out on the lake, and she caught this huge fish for her first time fishing. I don't think I caught anything, but she caught a huge fish and she was so proud of it. And it was really just a nice moment to be with my friend and my family at the same time, doing this thing that none of my friends, none of the other kids at school really liked fishing. So it was cool to be able to have this moment and be like, yes, this is fun.
So you're out on this lake in a boat and your mom's just caught this enormous fish. So as you, and I see you're smiling as you're describing that, were there any sounds or smells that you remember?
I remember the smell of the water. We were in Florida. I remember the feeling of having my little life jacket on. We had these blue and yellow life jackets.
Sure. So can you tell me, while you're talking about it, what do you notice happening in your body right now in the present moment?
I definitely got more energized. I felt myself, getting ready to jump up, like I'm ready to go outside.
So you touched your shoulders there. What sensation might you characterize it as?
I suppose I'm noticing that my shoulders are really loose. Like my muscles just feel relaxed.
Relaxed.
Like light.
Okay, so, and then I could ask Bria about, do you notice any change in your heart rate, your breathing, your muscles? She already named that. So are those sensations pleasant, unpleasant, neutral?
I'd say they're sort of neutral, but they're going towards pleasant.
Okay, so I would just suggest that you lean into that, sit with those sensations, maybe only 10 seconds. But what you've done is, by sharing that with me, with all of these people in this webinar, you've established sort of this template in your brain so that if you're outside your resiliency zone, you might think about that resource and see if it helps you get back into the zone. But thanks so much, Bria.
No, thank you. So when we're resourcing someone else, as you just saw Lindy do for me, we do not interpret or assume meaning. So when she asked me about which parts of what I mentioned were pleasant, she didn't assume that everything that we mentioned before, me having my friend there, were pleasant. We ask open-ended questions, we give that person time for sensations to develop, especially if this is the first time you've asked them to notice their body in some sort of way, it can be hard for people the first couple of times. We're not judgmental because anything can be pleasant for other people or unpleasant. We don't know how those sensations are translating into their brain. It's their own neurobiology. And we observe and stay one step behind. We don't direct. So you've heard Lindy use some of the same phrases that I use. Repeat after me. This is her staying one step behind and trying to pay attention to what I said. And then we actively use CRM in schools, clinics, community organizations, carceral settings. There's ways that we can bring resiliency focused questions into our everyday conversations and settings.
So, and then I would just add that I was a slow learner and I was kind of klutzy when I was trying to resource people. But it helped me when I understood that it's not about the sensations she had when she was out fishing with her mom when she was a kid. It's the sensations she's experiencing now. The other thing that people tend to do is they name abstract concepts like, oh, I feel calm or I feel happy. Those aren't sensations. So with CRM, we're going to push people. We're going to say, where do you notice calm in your body? And can you describe it? So that's like 2 more steps beyond happy, right? So this is what CRM is all about. And we think that by labeling it, by naming it, by localizing it, it's really going to create this very pleasant template that you can access.
So as I mentioned before, we can start to bring in our CRMs, bring into CRM into our conversations by focusing on the resiliency of these conversations. So at times people may want to tell you about a crisis that they've experienced, and they may kind of delve into maybe some of the more traumatic parts of the crisis. And you can start to see that come up on a person's body when that anxiety, they go back to that place of what they were doing in the crisis. So how we CRM people in these moments is we try to focus questions on the more resiliency, more relieving parts of their stories. So can you tell me the moment you knew you had survived? Can you tell me the moment that help arrived? Who or what is helping you the most right now? A good one is, have you helped anyone else? Were you able to help someone in your crisis as well? A moment of loss, can you tell me something meaningful or meaningful memory about them? What did you like to do together? What kind of words of encouragement would they say to you during difficult times? So we're focusing in on the more resilient parts. We're not ignoring their crisis or their loss. We're just trying to support them the best that we can. And lastly, sometimes when we ask for resources, people will mention something that's questionable, like sex, drugs, alcohol, or even things that we just know are not personally helpful for them. So maybe they have struggled with eating disorders, or they've struggled with over-exercising, and now we know that they've started exercising a little too much again, and they're saying that that's their new resource. So what we try to do is, there's either 2 ways we can go about this. So we have millions of resources. We can pick anything, including imagined resources. So asking those questions about like your dream vacation, something that we know is in a less questionable light, that's where we can start to go towards those other resources. Or we can ask questions surrounding the questionable resources. So where do you prefer to, do this specific thing? Is it a beautiful location? Is it a nice pond, or is it your room? Is there something really comforting about owning a space? We can talk around it. Is it someone you spend time with? Who are these people that you enjoy being with? Or can you tell me a specific special time? So these are ways we can go around it.
Yeah, and I think if you really get Bria's message there are resiliency questions that you can actually ask in conversations with people. What's helping you get through right now? And see what response you get. So basically, you're kind of shifting the narrative from crisis and trauma into a different sphere of resiliency and survival. So quickly about the biologic model, this three-part brain model is really handy. I'm teaching this tomorrow to 12 incarcerated teenagers here in Georgia, and we're going to be doing trainings for every single kid who's incarcerated, 11 through 17. So I simplified this slide. But down here in the bottom here, we have the brain stem, which is our survival part of our brain. In addition to just regulating our blood pressure and our heart rate and so on, it's good for our fight and flight. We don't need higher level thinking to figure out that we need to run when we're in danger. The limbic system in the middle of the brain is more about memories, attachment, and risk assessment, as well as all, this is our emotions and so on. But then up here we have the prefrontal cortex, where this is where we're such smart people, we make good decisions. But when we are overwhelmed by threat, for example, or distress, these lower brain regions really dominate, and our cortex goes offline, the prefrontal cortex. And of course, kids don't even have it developed until they're around 25. So when we're outside of our zone, that's when we lose this normally good connection between all three parts of the brain. And of course, that oversimplifies the brain a lot. So what we see when on the upswing of the resilient zone image, we have these changes in the body with the increase in heart rate, with the accelerator of the nervous system. And then with the parasympathetic taking over the brakes, we have lowering of heart rate and blood pressure and stress hormones, okay? And the GI tract comes back on board. So this is we can be aware of what's going on in our bodies to the extent that it's comfortable. The only thing you can regulate here is your breathing rate. You can't stop breathing, but you can do it. That's why this receives so much emphasis in yoga and other areas. This is let's see if I can. I didn't share the sound, so I'm gonna just tell you it right here. I urge you to look at that YouTube. It's only 2 minutes long. Dan Siegel is a child psychiatrist, and he's had enormous impact in the field of trauma. He says, okay, down here's your survival brain. The thumb represents the limbic system. So, and then on top is the cortex. So this is like a little hand model of the brain. And this can actually be taught to kids as little as 5 years old. When we're overwhelmed by threat, as I was just explaining, threat, fear, anger, okay, our cortex goes offline. So we don't have access to that override, which helps us make wise decisions. And that's why we act impulsively and make bad decisions that get us into trouble. So if you can, if you know the name, let's see, there's a phrase which is between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies a choice, and in that choice lies freedom and growth. So what we're saying is, here, your cortex has gone offline, you're overwhelmed by stress, but you have a moment to use CRM, and it could be something like tracking a sensation in your body, or even just noticing the texture of your clothing. And that's going to bring the cortex back on, because that's that part, it requires that part of the brain. And Bria, if you could copy that website into the chat so people can watch that afterwards, especially if you're a parent. I sure wish I'd seen that when I had my 4 kids. Briefly about what we know about stress and trauma. You know what ACEs are, the adverse childhood events. And we also know that community environments also are ACEs, racism, discrimination, and poverty. And then on top of all this, we have the pandemic and environmental disasters going on. So what we know from the ACE study is that most of us have ACEs. And in fact, probably 2/3 of us have at least one ACE, and there's a big chunk of people who have multiple ACEs. And that puts us at vulnerability for stress and trauma. And we also know that these are linked to health problems throughout the lifespan. So just this information alone is really important. And most of the public are clueless about this. You mental health people, you knew about it probably 10 years ago. Healthcare providers, not so much. But we are teaching it now to medical and nursing students. So, but adversity isn't destiny by any means. Many people I know have really high ACE scores and they've been incredibly successful in life, but they have to do a little extra work in terms of developing resiliency. And this is the positive experiences of childhood here in the blue box. This was developed by Christina Bethel, kind of in response to the ACEs, because what happens is not everybody with high ACE scores develop mental health problems. So she was interested in identifying which ones made the difference. And so we can see here, you all are professionals who work with children. And look at number 6 here, had 2 non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in them. And that can be a school counselor or teacher or a healthcare provider in the community. So these are the things we need to support in our families. And just a wee bit more about the brain, which I just adore this part. So how do you practice CRM? Use your 5 senses. That's a good way to start. Just pay a little bit more attention than you usually do. I went swimming this morning. I went through a corridor at the Y that was cold after I swam. And I was noticing that where on my body it felt chilly. It was just something little like that. Eating mindfully. When you eat, pay attention. Now you can also pay attention to sensations in the bodies. That's something you never got trained to do. And some people are really good about it. Some people are like, what are you talking about? But it's things like lightness, vibration, warmth, all of those words that Bria used. But it can also be hunger, pain, needing to go to the bathroom. So that the part of the brain where all this is happening is called the insula. And that's a part of the cortex, but it's buried way down here deep in the brain. And it's a way station so that it receives messages about body sensations, transmit them up here. Oh, I need to go to the bathroom. I need to eat something. But when you use CRM, we're taking advantage of the same pathways, but we're bringing the prefrontal cortex on board at a time when we might otherwise do something that could be not so good. So we know that when you practice CRM, you are affecting your brain. Perhaps you're developing it's a somatic intervention which could prevent, stress and the emergence even of mental health symptoms in young people. So that part of our brain is connected to body sensations, emotion regulation, social interaction, and empathy, and even our sense of who we are.
So we're going to go over another CRM scale. I want to point out that with all of our CRM scales, we are going to be tracking through each one. So when we talked about resourcing, we still came back to what do we feel in our body at this present moment. So grounding is noticing your connection with anything in the world that is supporting you right here in this very moment. So that could be your feet on the ground, your butt in a chair. It could even be your clothes on your body. Anything that you can pay attention to that connection to give your brain a break. Basically, let it know that you are on solid, safe ground. We don't have to worry about that part of existence right now. And we're not going to worry about anything else either. We're just going to pay attention to whatever is connecting us to the world, that is helping us stay grounded, helping us understand that we are on safe, solid ground. So you can do this in any position. You could be laying in water, you could be leaning against the wall, you could be sitting, walking, any time that you can just take a moment to pay attention to something that is physically connecting you to the world. So for nurses, we've heard of them. It's just taking a moment in the hallway, just a couple seconds to feel the wall and notice their feet on the ground. And we're not worried about what we did last week or what we're about to do in the next couple of minutes. We're just paying attention to our own body and whatever pleasant or neutral sensations that we can find inside of it. Because remember, whatever we pay attention to grows. So if we paid attention to those uncomfortable sensations, unpleasant sensations in your body, those sensations would grow. We would have a harder time ignoring them or not paying attention to them, the more attention we give to it. So we want to try to find the pleasant or neutral places in our body and just pay attention to those sensations. Let our brain understand those are important. So when we're grounded, we have a direct contact of the body with something that provides support in the present moment. We have a sense of self in relationship to present time and space. So we feel like we are presently here in this moment. We are not thinking too hard, that we're kind of feeling like we're floating off, and we're not worried about the past or the future. So grounding frees us to think clearly and control our emotions simply by letting our body know that we are safe. We are not running for our lives. So for some children who have had who've experienced physical or emotional trauma, might have difficulty with the skill of grounding because it asks you to stay with your body. And for some people, they have had to do that in traumatic moments. So grounding may increase sensations connected with those traumatic memories for those people. When I first tried to do yoga, I noticed my heartbeat and it freaked me out a little bit. I have since been able to work out with my therapist what that's about, and it is lessened over time, but I had to do that work first. So we don't want to force anyone to go into their sensations if they're not ready, if they're not at that point in their journey.
Gives you an unstable feeling, actually, that you put a pillow or a blanket on your lap, and that can help you feel more stable.
So weighted blankets also help. So our next skill of gesturing uses our body's natural functions to basically reassure us in moments. So naturally, we gesture whenever we have any sort of thought or feeling. Even if you were blind at birth, you would still gesture to sort of understand your feelings and express your thoughts. So we're not often aware of our gesturing because it's natural to us, but we can start to become aware of what gestures are calming or gestures that help us in stressful moments, help our nervous system come back into order. We don't want to pay attention to or increase gestures that are self-injurious or cause any sort of harm. So if you're pulling hair from places where you want hair to be, that's not something that we would encourage. We would, not say that that is part of the skill of gesturing or spontaneous movements. So with this skill, we are paying attention to what movements we already naturally do that are protective or self-soothing or make us feel powerful or strong. So some examples of self-calming gestures, touching your heart is a big one. For some people, they may rub their arms or touch their hands together. It's just whatever specifically helps you, touching the back of your neck. So we want to start noticing that these gestures have a calming effect on us, and then start doing them with intention when we find ourselves in moments of stress. Because if we know that this is calming for us, we don't have to explain that to anyone else. They don't have to know what we're doing in this moment when we're touching our heart, but we know that we are helping our nervous system. So our last two skills that we're going to talk about are help now and shift and stay. So with Help Now, this skill is very useful for when someone is outside of their zone. We don't have time to explain what your resiliency zone is right this second, but we can introduce a resiliency pause anyway. So a resiliency pause is just taking a moment to do something that helps our brain get our cortex back online, helps us know that we are safe, it slows us down, and eases our sensations to do that. So drinking a glass of water or tea, when you can offer someone who is upset a glass of water and ask them, hey, isn't that water pretty cold? Or is it, do you like room temperature water? If you gave them room temperature water, we want to try to pay attention, point out the sensation part. Or we can count backwards from 20. We're doing something that slowly introduces our cortex back online because it's one of the first things we learn involving our cortex, or naming the colors around the room. A big one, especially with children who get frustrated easily because life isn't really fair for kids sometimes, but we have them push against a wall. It can be with their arms, or it could be with your back against the wall and using your legs to push, but it helps basically get some of that energy out of you. Imagine we're pushing some of that frustration out, and it really helps activate a lot of kids. We have a video of that we've seen of a 2-year-old who was taught how to push against the dishwasher when he was frustrated by his older brother, who was teaching him, how to deal with frustration in that way. But these are just ways that we can get people back in their zone when they're out of it. Lastly is our shift and stay skills. So basically, once you have integrated tracking and these other skills into your life, we want to start noticing different times during our day. Are we identifying any sensations of distress? And if we are, like suddenly I've noticed my shoulder has been a bit stiff. Oh, it looks like I am holding some tension up here. I guess I am a little stressed today. Then I will shift to whatever skill works best for me in that moment. So if I have a moment and I can sit down, maybe I can resource myself, just remember what it was like to be on a vacation. Or if I need to just take a quick moment and pay attention to my feet on the ground, my clothes on my body, I could maybe do a Help Now skill, maybe go get myself a cup of cold water or hot tea. Maybe if I'm in the middle of talking to you guys right now, I can't get up and go do those things. So I'll just touch my chest, do a calming gesture that helps me. It could even be underneath the screen. I could be fiddling with my hands or rubbing my legs, and you can't even see that right now. And then we want to try to notice whatever pleasant or neutral sensations came up from practicing one of these skills, and then stay with them for about 10 to 15 seconds, whatever that sensation was that was pleasant or neutral, because that's how long it takes for your brain to really understand that this is important and will probably need to be repeated in the future.
Thank you, Bria. I just want to give a couple more examples. One of my colleagues who's in the leadership in the nursing department at Emory uses gesture. A lot of people prefer grounding, like even just touching your clothing, but she actually touches her chest because this is a gesture of comfort for her. When she's in a difficult work situation, like Bria said, nobody knows she's doing it. She doesn't even have to do it for more than a second or two, but so she would do this and it would bring her some strength under that. And another example for grounding, I ground on my steering wheel, actually, noticing the texture and so on. But I can tell you that one time I came home and had to have a difficult conversation with a family member. And as I got out of the car, I paid attention to the surface that I was walking on. And, the concrete of the driveway was different from the flagstones of the front path, was different from the mat before the door, was different from the carpet where I stepped inside, and the wooden floor, and then the linoleum. It was different. The sensation was different. So it was that simple, and it transpired only over maybe 10 or 15 seconds. But by the time I got to the kitchen, I was pretty settled. So you don't need to be doing CRM 24/7 at all. Just off and on during the day, if you think about it, use some of these body awareness skills and see what happens, and share them with other people. So this is a helpful slide. How do we focus our attention when we're under stress? Well, if it pushes us into the higher low zone, we'll tend to have negativity. And we have this natural bias in the mind to focus on negative stuff, and there's survival value in that. So yeah, that makes sense, but we can also take it in another direction. So we engage in a whole lot of behaviors sometimes that are not helpful by disconnecting, for example, with others, or being aggressive. If we can use the CRM skills, and of course, whatever other skills you have, you can help yourself move into the resilient zone. Once we're there, that's when we can help other people. We've got to be emotionally stable ourselves. And something interesting about CRM is if I use a CRM skill when I'm in a difficult conversation, for example, the other person attunes to me. So this is really, in Georgia, we're doing a lot with maternal child, even prenatal health with CRM. But so if you yourself are settled, people around you can settle as well and get into a better space. And that's when we can be our most useful, because we all work in the service of others. So basically that's it. Put your own oxygen on, mask on first, and try to use the CRM skills, see if they're helpful, because you can't teach anybody else unless you know what they are. And we really want you to do that iChill app, because it'll reinforce everything we just did. So where does that put us? So I want you to think of yourself as this big blue button here. You are a community resiliency model guide. Okay. If you want to become a teacher, fantastic. We'd love that. It takes a whole week and it's expensive. But I can tell you that I was the first person in Georgia, and now we've got, I think, 150 CRM teachers scattered around the state of Georgia. And there may be people in your state who are already teaching CRM. So primarily think about, for your own well-being, for your own wellness, it's self-care. It's not therapy. Start using these concepts like the resilient zone, the 3-part brain model, etc. And you're welcome to share the app with anybody. So you can see this is really about population mental health, because it's accessible. You can teach it quickly. And even if you never do a teacher training, if you really get good at this, you can teach everybody in your networks. If you want, you can look at our website, crimgeorgia.org. And Bria, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great, as well as my email, please, in case anybody wants to reach me. I do have a simple set of slides of 10 slides that are the best ones out of this. And if you want to show them to your practice or your school, I can send them to you. So basically, it's right here in our own hands. We have these resources. That's why it's so empowering, because when you resource somebody, they're finding something that comes from within themselves, which is comforting and stabilizing for them. This slide is always taught during the CRM classes, taking a look at equality, inequality, and then equality, meaning what does that mean? People are treated the same way regardless of their differences, see? So now we've got, it looks equal, but it's not. Equity is correcting for disadvantage. So considering the individual needs of people, but then what we really need is justice, which is where treating everybody that makes things right. So we need systems changes. And this is from the person that did the giving tree. We did the first research on CRM here at Emory on nurses, and we had significant improvement in well-being significantly reduce secondary stress and physical symptoms. What are they? Headaches, backaches, sleeplessness, all those things which are manifestation of how, stressed we are. That's how it gets expressed. This second article was with other healthcare and social service workers, same results. We did it with women in drug treatment, and we had very, very similar results, plus less anger and anxiety. And then this one just came out. And so you have a reference list here if you want to look at. This is a free article. And this was during COVID. So everybody was stressed. We did it with all these healthcare workers. And they only got 1 hour of virtual CRM. So you already have a little bit more than they got. And our results were very, very powerful again. So this is on its way to becoming evidence-based practice. So, but you're in the forefront with it. So take it and run with it. There's the iChill app. And if you don't have a smartphone, this is a website where you can listen to the same exact thing. And there's my email, and I'll be glad to be in touch with somebody if they've got some brilliant ideas for CRM. And we would like to take questions.
And I believe the slides will be sent afterwards, or you'll have access to the slides after today's presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lindy. Thank you, Bria, for the information that you presented today. We will be sure to post those slides. Lots of folks are asking for that. And the resources they shared and the links, we'll be posting that information too. Yeah, so we have a few minutes for questions for our presenters. Please feel free to drop a question in the chat. We'll be scanning that and answering your questions.
I'm glad you enjoyed the training. To be trained, you have to go to the Trauma Resource Institute website. If you could put that in there, Bria, did you already? This is a very simple model. These skills, you can start using them right away. I think that's why I'm such a champion, because really, we taught a group of elders in the Atlanta community. They were African Americans with mild cognitive impairment, and they had a significant changes in anxiety and depression. Yeah. So I am a nurse, so I'm interested in clinical applications, and nobody's really looking at mental health. People are looking at interoceptive awareness, which appears to, in general, improve mental health outcomes. But for example, if it's, drilling into interoceptive awareness in terms of negative body sensations, that's not so good. So I think the CRM perspective is so valuable.
There was a question in the question and answer form. Looks like it's more tailored towards your experience.
Yeah. So what I would do, if you want to send me your email, I can send you a set of 10 slides, which are the best ones from this with the resilient zone and the body maps. And I can send that to you if you want to sort of like propose it to your work team or whatever. You can absolutely share these skills with coworkers. And I believe that the team at Emory needs to also put an evaluation in there, but I'm still monitoring the chat. And thank you for all your very positive comments. We love doing this because we love CRM.
Yeah, a few chats coming through. I see one that has asked, have you worked or trained certified peer specialists on this model?
Actually, I work with a certified peer specialist here in Atlanta, and thank you for those groups are so effective. And she's a CRM teacher here in Atlanta, and I would be glad to connect you with her if you're interested. She loves CRM. She immediately saw the value. Right.
Okay, well, while I'm ending the presentation, we'll give a few minutes for folks to just enter in another question if you have it. But in the meantime, Lindy and Bree, we want to thank you for your presentation today and providing such helpful information to our audience. The Southeast MHTTC would like to thank all of our participants for joining us today. We invite you to complete a brief SAMHSA required survey by visiting the link presented on your screen. Completion of the survey will provide information to SAMHSA and also help us in planning future events. Afterwards, you'll be automatically redirected to additional questions from us regarding the impact of this event on your knowledge and skills. You will also have the opportunity to download a certificate of attendance for your own records. Please allow your browser about 5 to 10 seconds to redirect you. Thank you again for joining us for today's presentation. We hope you'll join us for future events. Be sure to check out our website to learn more about those future events, as well as check back possibly on Monday, definitely in a few days, for the recording from this event and the presenter slides. Again, thank you all for joining us, and that concludes today's event.